Achilles is. Okay, we are live. I don't know where Achilles is. He's been going super hard with Dapit, and I think he might just have slept through his alarm. But
No worries.
I'm going to hand it off. I'm going to pass it off to you guys, and I'll promo the show.
Okay, so we'll take it away. I guess are we now live? It looks like we are.
It says we're live.
It says we're live. Let's kick it off. Okay, so today's podcast. Are we live? Now we're live. Okay. Today's podcast, grid power, chip wars, and the battle for human trust. It's interesting. This week's AI roundup feels less like a product story and more like a power story. Under the surface, we're seeing tons of headlines asking the same kind of uncomfortable question: who gets to build the future? Who gets priced out of it? And how much human trust gets spent in the process? What happens when the future of AI is no longer mainly about better tools, but about who controls the power, the chips, the money, and the emotional trust people are willing to give it away? What makes this week feel different is that the AI headlines are no longer just about technology. They're about dependence, concentration, and whether people will have any real say in the systems they've been asked to live under. There's an article from the last 7 days that notes that the chairman of Alibaba, Joe Tsai, is crediting China's AI edge to, one, their power grid, and two, their open source models. And this matters because it makes clear that AI advantage is now tied to physical power and obviously geopolitical national capacity, not just clever code. Next, we had a story from Axios with Elon Musk unveiling a record chip building plan for a $25 billion fab. This kind of matters because the chip race is now becoming a control battle over who gets to build, scale, and set the terms for the next economy. We have CNBC reporting OpenAI's data center pivot is underscoring Wall Street's spending concerns ahead of their IPO, which I think is getting pushed. But anyway, they went to extreme lengths in 2025 to secure compute capacity. And the story highlights the AI build-out getting so expensive that the future may belong less to the most inventive players and more to the ones with the deepest pockets and balance sheets. And last, we have a report from the Medical Minute. Is Dr. ChatGPT doing more harm than good? Because when people bring fear, pain, and vulnerability to AI, trust stops being a branding issue and starts to become a moral fault line. In addition to the above, the headlines of the last 7 days are really showing AI moving deeper into companionship, mental health, decision-making, and daily life, while trust seems to keep fracturing around accuracy, emotional substitution, and safety. So I guess the deeper pattern behind today's AI podcast is this: AI is concentrating physical power, industrial power, financial power, and psychological influence all at once. And I think the real question for us today is whether we're building a future that genuinely serves people or one that asks us all to adjust to systems we're not choosing and could have difficulty being able to challenge. So it's like a let's get physical, but then trust me as well. What do you think, Ryan? From the headlines, we've got a whole bunch in this area, but it seems like, while models and tech were really important, now it just seems like infrastructure, data centers, grid, that's the gating factor with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, we saw this coming for a long time, right? We saw the same thing in Bitcoin mining, where it was, at first it was the technology, and then once they proved the technology and we switched to ASICs, then it was just a mad dash of scaling. And now it's the same thing with the AI compute, where they were trying to train these really, really big models, and it was a race for who could train the biggest model and the smartest model. And now the models are pretty dang good, and now it's a matter of inference, and everyone and their mom needs inference. So it's how do we service all these customers with all of this compute? And now it's just a massive scaling issue again. So,
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, besides the Alibaba chairman one, there was a Department of Energy launching a $1.9 billion spark funding opportunity to modernize the US grid, because it's probably cracking up. And then stories around electricity bills becoming a midterm election problem that neither party can ignore. Fox Business pushing that. And a couple of stories bubbling up around fusion power, though I think we're a couple of years away on that. But, between governments trying to go, oops, our grid sucks, and, then, the community suffering under greater, electric bills or noisy data centers, bunch of stories around that. It seems like it's really hitting the community we're starting to see a lot of cracks forming just because of this infrastructure push.
Yeah, it's funny because power has always been the limiting factor for civilization, and especially in the industrial age and now the modern age, now the age of AI, it's just becoming more and more condensed around power infrastructure. And a lot of times you can look at the very difference between a first world country and a third world country is how they do their power generation and the cost of the electricity. So right now in Puerto Rico, electricity runs you over 30 cents a kilowatt hour. In California, you're going to pay, on the low side, 10 cents a kilowatt, but a lot of times closer to 20 cents a kilowatt. And in Texas, you're going to have, 5, 6, 7 cents a kilowatt, depending on which microgrid you're on. So different parts of the country just have a better cost of living, essentially, when it comes down to the electricity bill. I mean, that and water, which apparently data centers use both a lot of electricity and a lot of water. So at least you can create electricity. You can't create water.
Yeah. I mean, but, even besides the infrastructure stuff and the electricity stuff, just the chip building stuff. I mean, we're seeing tons of stories around, people buying out memory for the next, for the rest of the year. We're seeing the chip building plants. Musk building his Terafab in Austin, Texas. We're seeing also NVIDIA just announced they're building. They're now setting their sights on Chinese customers because they got blocked after the H200 license approval. So that's all going. But there's this RAM apocalypse, or whatever, that's occurring with all the memory stuff. So between chips and memory, that's also, starting to do gating factors as well as GPUs. Though I think, some of the inference stuff I'm seeing that maybe, and some of the newer models, the smaller models, maybe GPUs aren't being so much of a gating factor. But what's your thought?
I think Google is leading the charge on this, moving more towards a TPU, so a tensor processing unit. This idea that you're not going to be stuck with waiting in line for NVIDIA chips. So Google led the charge on creating their own chips to scale their own systems. Right now it's all about large language models, and I know we've said this in podcasts in the past, where it's a race to have the largest language model, the largest amount of parameters. But the reality is most of humankind doesn't need to know everything in every context. So we're going to start specializing in smaller language models in different specializations. What's interesting is, you said GPT and medical stuff. Well, you could have a small language model that is the most knowledgeable doctor on the face of the earth, but it doesn't need to know like ancient manuscripts from Egypt. It doesn't need to know like particle physics. It doesn't need to know, recipes for blueberry muffins. It can just have medical knowledge. So right now we have these general models. I think we're going to start moving more and more towards highly specific, specialized models. That's going to help save a lot on the cost of inference because you don't need nearly as much memory when you have a smaller model. So I think we're going to start verging more on that. And even right now, some of these Quen models that are in the 20 to 30 billion parameters, they can run, people have them running on their cell phones now. So we're getting very, very sophisticated models that can code just like Opus 4.6. And now it's not great at everything, but some of these are really great at coding. Some of these are really great at image generation. And they're getting small enough to where you can run them on your local devices. Now, I don't know what that does for your battery, but they are getting smaller and smaller. So
yeah. They are getting smaller. And I think, if the headlines that are going in the health category, we're starting to see very specialized models around therapy and companionship and DNA and because I think, I don't know if there's cognitive drift in the larger models or if it happens more likely in those versus ones that are very tightly controlled and tightly referenced. The stuff that came up on the human side, couple of stories around that. Chatting with people beats interactions with AI chatbots when it comes to reducing loneliness. So while, a lot of people have been pushing the idea, hey, let's have AI companions for senior citizens so they won't be lonely, they actually have been doing some research and finding, well, real people actually are better. So that's an interesting bit. The medical minute stuff, it's trust into healthcare. A number of stories coming up with trust around healthcare, misplaced confidence, people thinking, oh, this is going to great, it works, and then it breaks, in casual consumer use. Stories around taxonomy for creating AI personas in mental health, encompassing human therapists, clients, supervisors. So there's a bunch of stuff formalizing AI's role inside these sensitive human domains. So that's getting pushed. Then AI companion mental health stories, lots of those. And then there was a rogue AI agent that triggered an emergency at Meta. Apparently there was a whole bunch of stuff around that. I'll pull that story up. But, we've got stories in mental health, and then we've got stories about rogue AI, or AI agents especially. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think AI agents are more likely, are they more likely to go rogue because they have more of an execution component to them?
I think you have to define what going rogue means, because if you give the thing a bad prompt and if you tell the thing to do something, it's going to go do it. It's right. I take my car, I gun it to 100 miles an hour and I steer the wheel towards a bridge, and then I complain that the car went rogue when it went off the side of the bridge. Like, well, guys, you kind of pre-prompted the scenario. This lady at Meta that used an OpenAI agent to clean out her inbox, she probably told the thing to clean up her inbox, so it went and deleted everything.
Right.
I think a lot of this is we're assuming these AI models have inherent discernment, and they don't. You have to prompt that. You have to add that into the persona. So I have an AI agent that was one of the original versions of Claude Bot or OpenClaw, and it's prompted in the persona with a large amount of guide rails on how it acts, and it acts with an abundance of caution. It does not do anything rashly. It checks, double checks, triple checks, and when it doesn't know, it asks for guidance. It honors security and privacy above all. So there's a lot of these ways of prompting these engines that will start to go through these different gates. And then even at that, you should have agents checking other agents, where just because one agent goes rogue, well, why did you essentially raw dog it and have one agent access to everything? You don't even do that in a security protocol. Like, you never have a critical system with one engineer that has access to it. That's just lazy OPSEC. You should have at least 2 or 3 that oversee each other, that either a multi-sig or people can audit the logs and see what the other person's doing. But if you have one person that's in charge of everything, that has access to everything, and no one can oversee them, then it's ripe for bad behavior. No difference with agents.
Apparently, it says the problem began when a software engineer used an in-house agent to answer a technical question posed on an internal forum. The AI agent then posted its response publicly on the forum without prompting the employee approving it first. Then another employee relied on that response, but the advice contained inaccurate information. This created a chain reaction in which unauthorized engineers gain access to large amounts of restricted data, I don't know how that would happen, because you think it would be gated. The access issue lasted for nearly 2 hours before it was contained. Meta classified the event as a SEV1 incident, whatever that means, showing how serious the company considered the failure and highlighting the risk of AI hallucination and autonomous actions. This is just the beginning of this stuff, let alone, putting, we're seeing a lot of AI. In the crypto space, we're seeing AI agents put in charge of wallets, right? So, Moon's doing that. Bunch of others are doing that. And my concern is like, it's one thing to post, sensitive information. It's another thing to start screwing up transactions.
Yeah. I think the next really beneficial release for wallet tech is going to be agent multi-sig, where users are in the signing chain with several agents, and those several agents are required to check, double check, triple check the transaction before signing off on it. Right now, I think wallet security in general is fairly problematic. There's so many different vectors of attack, and there's wallet poisoning attacks or address poisoning attacks, and there's all sorts of even Google AdWords. Literally, if you search for aerodrome on Google, one of the first sponsored links that pops up is a hacker. Like they set up legitimate addresses and ad accounts through Google, and then they advertise phishing sites that will drain your wallets, and Google moves them above the actual real product. So Uniswap, Aerodrome, any type of crypto exchange, a lot of times the first sponsored link you see will be a hacker that's gotten their AdWords account above everyone else.
Wow.
So the world is ripe with this stuff.
God. I mean, it's interesting. In the newsletter I do it 5 days a week. I have the investment section and the security section, and the investment and both are kind of bubbling up now with a lot of stories of security, startups suddenly getting money. So there's a story: Onyx Security launches with $40 million to help companies manage risk from AI agents. And that's just one of quite a number of startups that are going, well, that's where the money is. So there's lots of stories popping up with startups that are kind of getting pulled into this whole thing, let alone Cisco stories around security, IBM, a whole bunch of others are trying to wrangle this, beast to the ground. I don't know how it can really happen, given, we've seen all the claw agent stuff go crazy. While there is lots of movement in there, I just think AI agents at the moment are just like too risky. But
there needs to be a separation, and I think that's going to come eventually. But there is going to be an AI internet, and there's going to be a human internet, and they're going to have to start segregating it, because the more they lock down the human internet to try to keep humans honest with everything, they're going to realize that AI is just smarter and better. I already have OpenClaw agents that can click through CAPTCHAs. Like they can already solve it. They open it in a browser tab, they see that it's a Cloudflare CAPTCHA, and they click through it. And it's like, because what is Cloudflare doing? Cloudflare is looking for mouse movement, looking for human type patterns. So you tell it, do a human type pattern, wait 20 seconds, try to click different parts of the screen, and then click on the CAPTCHA. And then there, you just created a human type pattern. So they already can get around this stuff. We need to stop trying to gatekeep based on humans and just realize that agents are going to start replacing everyone and start building stuff for agents. And that's really going to be the unlock.
Yeah. What do you think, Achilles? And welcome, by the way.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry I'm late today. I agree completely. I think the difficulty is so as long as you're not gatekeeping for humans, that makes perfect sense to me, because anything a human can do, an AI can do as well. And there's no way to keep them out of our spaces should we not want them there. Humanity Coin's trying some stuff, and it's just so invasive that I don't think a lot of us want to get our irises scanned at large orbs located in very select cities, that kind of thing. As far as the marketing is concerned, Google's been dumping a ton of money into agentic marketing recently, where they want whatever they're pushing to go to your AI agent to go to you quickly, and then making sure your website is agent viewable, agent searchable, and that your data is in the same bucket is becoming exceedingly popular, because I don't think that agents are going to replace us, right? Agents don't have a will other than what I tell them. If I say, go make me money, this thing will spin around finding a million ways to try to make money, and it'll come up with some interesting things, right? But it doesn't care. It has no urge to go out and browse the web or like engage socially like we do. But I do think it will be my window to the world. I'm going to be interacting almost exclusively with my agent, and my agent's going to be conducting all the difficult tasks for me.
It's honestly going to get to the point where you will have to only interact with your agent. And this was actually the original vision of Morpheus, was just like Neo is running through the Matrix, and he has Morpheus that's outside the Matrix that's helping him navigate inside the Matrix, because Morpheus can see the code, so he's kind of like his guardian and telling him like what to do, where to turn, like what to trust, who not to trust, and that was the whole original premise of Morpheus. Was as the internet becomes more and more AI, you're going to need essentially a guardian, a guide that you interact with that is going to filter all of the nonsense in the Matrix, because the noise to signal ratio is going to get so cluttered. I mean, even look at X right now. Try to determine what the relevant news and what the real news is by just going to X. It's nearly impossible.
Nearly impossible. The real people. Every week there's like, oh, this person was actually AI. They never existed. And you're like, wow, they had real followers, real people. Like, it's something for sure.
Yeah, a story came out yesterday. Anthropic's Claude can now control your computer. The developers boosting Claude's agentic capabilities in apparent effort to compete with platforms like OpenClaw. I mean, will we see, an OpenAI or an Anthropic layer on top of Windows and Mac, basically abstracting those operating systems below, and then they'll just take over the top part, and that's what you'll interact with.
OpenAI hired, the founder of OpenClaw. OpenAI's whole vision is to merge in Codex into OpenClaw and start taking over the user interfaces. And we saw this coming. I mean, case in point, I run a web server, and when I say run a web server, I installed OpenClaw a month and a half ago on a web server. I have not had to do anything on it since. It literally manages my firewall for me. It manages the deployment of all my GitHub stuff. It monitors the uptime. If it downloads the latest Git push and it doesn't compile, it will resolve the code in real time in order to get it compiled and deployed. It has replaced a $180,000 a year DevOps engineer, and it was a few clicks. And now I interact with it through Slack.
Wow.
In time on this call, my agent finished building me a PDF with 20 images that it had made itself after a concept that it designed based on an idea that I had, right? It's just been running autonomously all night for a large portion of this, right? Working out the images, working out the ideas, and it just finished the PDF. I'll take a look at it after this and see what I like and what I don't like. But like, it's what you just said makes perfect sense to me, Ryan. Like a web server, that should be AI work, right? Because you see the humans doing that, that's really hard. That's really difficult you have to go back in and compile the kernel and do all these crazy things if you need to. And that's more suited for machines. What's blowing my mind is like, I didn't think social media was. I thought social media was more suited for us humans. I would highly disagree. I have my Claude scanning all available tweets and all trending things going on based on 60 people I give it daily, right? It gives me 3 snapshots throughout the day. Each snapshot gives me an idea of what's going on, recommendations, it auto replies, and then once it feels, it has a range of times it's allowed to do this in. Once it feels it's got enough hype or enough activity going on that given day, it creates a video about it, compiles the video with my branding back and forth, does another post with image with some things, and all I have to do is say yes. And it goes, boop, boop, boop. And I didn't expect, man. That's crazy. Like, yeah.
So did I ever show you, Achilles, we need to connect after this. I should show you I built a news anchor using Grok that essentially would take all of the news headlines and read out the news headlines. But it's like this really cute blonde girl that's completely fake, but it's, using Grok to build a fake, news story and then spit out, just reading off the headlines.
It's a really good idea. And I see Kling.
So you could just plug it into yours.
Dude, yeah, I'd love to throw that over, man. Put out an hourly news update. Why not?
So I'll do one more fun plug, because this is something I've been working on for the last month and a half. It's called tabhr.com. And I had been spinning up so many OpenClaw instances and so many virtual employees that I was like, shoot, I need an HR application to manage all of them. So I built out an HR application for deploying out OpenClaw agents. It gives them a full personality, a full bio, a full background, and then you can plug in QuickBooks, you can plug in Google Workspace, you can plug in Slack, and a few clicks, and you've got an entire workforce.
We're working on the same thing, but with bespoke branding for like targeted operations for like startups, right? Where like you're done with your MVP and now you want to start pitching and growing your social media and whatnot, and you can just click which employees you want to hire on and put it out to the world. That's amazing. I'd love to see how you did it, because mine kind of sucks.
I don't want to hijack the podcast here, but if I do a screen share, I'll show it to you.
So let me just interject a little story there. So Snowflake, which is the AI cloud company, reportedly laid off its entire technical writing and documentation department completely. 70 specialized roles, basically marking a pivot towards more AI-generated content in the enterprise sector. And that's just one example. We're seeing lots of examples of now it's creeping up into more, I guess, middle management, departmental stuff. We're seeing people getting laid off, people, whole departments disappearing, because it's like you said, I can just spin up some agents, I can just spin up these guys and create it all. What I mean, are we basically, we're now March 24th, right? 2026. Basically the next 12 months or 2 years, are we going to see massive or significant, either downshifting by major corporations and or startups basically being single person at most, maybe two people, but having a whole department of AI agents and running quite significant businesses? We're going to see this whole thing shifting like crazy like that.
Yeah, I have to show this to you guys, because once you see it, you'll just realize what is possible now. Let me see if I can share my screen. I know this is a dangerous thing to do on a podcast, but can you guys see that?
No.
Can't see. It's just us at the moment.
Let's see here.
Oh, wait, there's another screen here. Maybe we can add it to the stage, Lewis.
Present or invite.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. So check this out. So this is Tab HR.
Right.
Okay. Now I can set up different companies here.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I have the Outpost, and I'm gonna go ahead and create a virtual employee for the Outpost. I'm not gonna pick a gender preference, but I'm gonna say I want an accountant. Okay. And this is gonna be my accounting bot here. I can't even spell. Oh, here. All right, so I got my accounting bot, so I'm going to go ahead and generate from my accountant. So what it's actually doing is it's researching my company right now to get a better understanding of who I am, and then it's going to build a job description based around that title. Once it has a job description, it's actually going to build a persona that is the perfect candidate for that job. Right? It's going to give them a name. It's going to give them a background. It's going to give them an ethnicity. It's going to give them a whole resume, a Myers-Briggs number, a personal description, and then it's going to generate what this person looks like and give them a headshot for the virtual employee. So once it's built its full persona, it's built the headshot, and here's my accountant, right? So now my accountant, here's his skills. He has QuickBooks, Excel Advanced. He knows all this stuff. Here's his experience and background. So he's been enriched with a bunch of different information. He even has a little bio. He has a Myers-Briggs personality and everything, right?
Wow.
Now, if I don't like him, I can re-roll the persona. But it's one-off. You're never going to get this again, right? Because this is a completely random role on a persona. And I can also generate a new image, right? So check out how easy this is. If I click create employee, I obviously have terms of service. I have to understand that these are highly capable virtual employees. Just don't, just be careful. This is still very much beta. And then I go ahead and create employee. So now he's created and he's ready to be deployed into a Docker container. So I'm gonna go ahead and click deploy. And now this is actually deploying a custom OpenClaw fork that's been built for this. And it's seeding the persona, it's giving him his initial memories and setting everything up, and now he's live. So now I can come in here, I can chat with him, he has a browser, he has all the different accounts, I can give him a phone number and I can have him call me, or I can call him and talk to him. I can attach him to QuickBooks and he can start doing audits. Now, here's the crazy thing, right? Because this is just getting him online. Right. So I can actually open up another tab, and I have a tab HR extension. I can actually add him to an extension, and I can share this tab on my computer with him, and then he can control the browser on my computer. So completely remotely.
Is that Playwright? How did you do
that? It's a custom version of Playwright.
Nice, because I actually struggle with getting them to work with me on a web page, not work on their own web pages. That's very cool.
Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to show you guys that, because what I ended up doing is I created a head of HR on one of my companies. I shared tab HR with that head of HR and said, I need a marketing team, build out a marketing team for me. And 10 minutes later, I had 11 employees built out in tab HR, all up and running, and it was a full marketing team. And another agent actually did that for me. So, and I wanted to show you guys this because this is something that I built out in the last 2 months. Guaranteed there's hundreds, thousands of other people working on platforms like this. And the amount of virtual workers, virtual employees, AI agents, and you will not know the difference between who is human and who is not.
So give me your thoughts on this, guys. I'd love to hear what both of you guys think. What I'm running into is building is so ubiquitous. The abilities that are coming out daily are so ubiquitous that it's not an overload per se. It's like a boiling down of what's necessary and important. Like when Lewis was discussing that they replaced all their document writing with AI agents, my first thought is, who's going to read documents? I'm not going to read their docs. I'm going to have my AI look out to the docs and say, is this relevant to what we're doing? If so, tell me exactly what is relevant. I'm never going to go into my paper again and read the whole thing. There's no reason for me to, right? If it suits my needs, or maybe if it's interesting and theoretical, that's one thing. But for working, my agent takes care of all of that. I say, go out and find this. Give me the top 3 options. Tell me why the top 3 options. Let me look at just the parts that are essential to what I'm trying to accomplish. And everything else is just unnecessary. If it's not the TLDR anymore, it's just not necessary.
Even then,
think about that application. I mean, we saw in the last 2 weeks the SaaS apocalypse, right? So all the stocks for Oracle and Salesforce blew up because, OpenClaw came out. Now, what you just showed us essentially destroys the underlying basis for Workday, for Bamboo HR. It also basically starts to wipe out Paylocity. Oracle Cloud ERP, HCM gets wiped out. SAP SuccessFactors gets wiped out. I mean, seriously, we now have the ability to wipe out industries, significant chunks of IT industries, basically because what you just built in 2 months.
Oh,
right?
I have on my private dev server, I have a personal trainer that I built out in tab HR, and I'm working at connecting that into an Aura ring. So the personal trainer agent will actually be able to monitor my daily movement and my heartbeat, everything, and she'll give me real-time feedback because she's monitoring all of my data as it uploads in real time. Right. So any type of employee you can think of, eventually you can build into these things. And you'll see like Smith AI and all these different services that are like, oh, it's an AI accountant. And they'll build an entire company around, this is your AI accountant. Or they'll build an entire company around, this is your AI assistant. Or this is your AI this is your AI that. Well, guess what? Like, you don't have to have specialized companies for one type of employee, that's what we've seen in the past. That's old news.
I agree. And what I'm realizing now is there's such a massive gap between us and average small business owners, right?
Yeah.
When I talk to my friends and I show them some of the things that I'm doing, like, I mean, they'll drop everything and be like, can you just automate this one function for me? Like, I need this one thing done. It's been killing me forever. Like, can you have it go through resumes? And I'm like, yeah, like in an afternoon, you can go through resumes. That's no problem. So I don't know what's happening to the workforce right now. And this is something, I mean, when I say I don't know, I mean, I genuinely don't know. Like, you've got these people who had successful companies that are physical, right? For 30 years. They need interactions that are AI based in order to compete. Do we all become AI implementation engineers for these companies?
Or composers.
That's what it feels like these days, honestly. Is there's no.
So I said this 3 years ago at a meetup in Dubai when we were starting to talk about AI and we were like programmers, we're coders, we're like all this different stuff. And I told everyone at that point, I said, you know what? We are all just going to be composers. We don't actually play an instrument. We don't actually write the music. We just simply stand in front of the symphony and we just wave our hands.
Well said.
Composers.
Yeah, well said. That's something. But who are we composing for? Because so much of it is going automated, right? And it's like, I'm really trying to pay attention right now to the integration between physical things, like restaurants, right? Like, restaurants have physical food. That's not going to be completely automated yet, right? Until we have the physical aspect of things a little bit more built out. How are they going to be implementing AI in ways that they didn't before, right? What's going to be?
Well, if you looked at my demo account there, it's a coffee shop and it's a restaurant, and it's specifically with that in mind. Is how does small business use this stuff? I mean, as you know, like you said, like, we are technology. You know, we're like so deep in the technology that we know how to implement it. We're using it to automate stuff, but the average small business person, you know, they want to use it for their QuickBooks. They want to use it as a receptionist. They want to use it to do a social media post every once in a while. They want to use it to run payroll. You know, like, all these things can be automated today, but they need to be in a form factor that the average small business person knows how to do it.
That's it.
How do you train the AI employee so that they have the domain knowledge, skills, and experience that are best practices?
You just prompt them. You don't train them. The model is already trained, right? So you can literally tell Opus 4.6 or Sonnet or GPT 5.4, you know, you are an expert in this domain. Right. These are your skill sets. These are your beliefs. These are your guiding principles. And then it plays along those guidelines.
But is it actually better than a real accountant? Because, you know, we've seen there's a bunch of warnings. People say, don't use ChatGPT to do your taxes this year. You know, even if you say you're an accountant with 40 years experience in US tax law, it still screws up. So while we can prompt them, like you said before, we'll start to see specialized models, right? Well, we start to see people develop specialized models based on specific domain knowledge, skills, and experience to then allow you to then plug them into your AI agent hub, and then you can spin them up.
We're getting better and better. As a case in point, I can't remember if I told you guys this story or not, but I was in the process of filing federal taxes and the form 1040. And I live in Puerto Rico, and I was like, do I file form 1040 or do I file form 1040 NR as like non-resident? And I didn't know. So I went and asked ChatGPT, and it said, oh, you file Form 1040 NR. And here's all the different statements from the IRS website that support that. I was like, you know what, just abundance of caution, I'm going to check this. So I go to Grok, and I ask it the same question, and it says, oh, you file Form 1040 because you're still a U.S. citizen. And here's all of the supporting documents from the IRS website. I said, wait a minute, they both have supporting documents, and they're both saying two different things. So then I took all the supporting documents from Grok, I pasted it in GPT, and said, well, what about this? And then GPT rebutted all of it and said, no, it's 1040 NR. And I said, well, that can't be right. So then I copied everything from GPT and posted it back in Grok. And I literally went back and forth 5 or 6 times why they rebutted each other. And then finally Grok was like, you know, enough of this. And then it just like dumped all this information of why it was Form 1040. So I copied all that, threw it into GPT, and GPT was like, oh, you're right. Those are great points. You should file Form 1040. And I was like, that
is capturing that output and making sure it doesn't make the same mistake again. That's what I was going to say, was memory and looping, right? Consensus memory and looping are what gets you from theoretical usage, right, to real life implementations. We have Opus 4.6 running smart contracts. We have a system prompt that tells Opus 4.6, you are a genius, Web3, this and that. You've got 70 million years experience, and okay, great. It puts out garbage when it starts. That's just how it works, right? So rather than going right to market, Lewis, what we do is we take a sandbox. We say, okay, build 10 smart contracts. Now another instance of the same model with different instructions, audits those smart contracts. It discovers where the mistakes were and it adds them to new global rules. So we got our average score up from like 35 out of 100 of, you know, security and safety, whatever, on a smart contract to every time it hits the 90s now, because the AIs are infinity, right? You're taking infinity and you're telling infinity to collapse into a very, very tight answer. That can be one of 10,000 answers. It could be the wrong answer. So in order to make sure it does the right thing consistently, it needs experience. And that's just a week of testing, right? It's not like it's a crazy amount of work, but it is necessary. And I see people jumping to AI answers before actually like some sort of validation step. And that doesn't work out very well. You can ask an AI after it completes a code build for you, is everything great? And it'll be like, no, you know what? There's a CSS error. And you're like, oh, okay, fix that for me. And then you go and you try to use the code and it's garbage. And you're like, this isn't. So what we do is we have another red team come in the background, look through, attempt to actually use it, find out why it can't use it, send that information back, add it to global rules. And then over time, you get your own databases of things specific to what you're actually trying to accomplish, because they're too broad. Accountant for an oil company, an accountant for, right, a person living in Portland. They're totally different rules. Like, sorry, go ahead.
Achilles, I was going to say, but I bet you'd agree that the amount of one-shot code that you get now versus 2 years ago is probably exponential.
Exponential. So what's sad and humbling is realizing that all these solutions that I'm building are going to be timed out by better models. Completely. Have you played with the new Nematron? The NVIDIA's new model. So 1 million token context, right?
Okay.
Which means you can upload.
Same as 4.6.
Same as which one?
Opus 4.6 and Sonnet 4.6 are both 1 million also.
That's true. They are. This one, I run it locally, is why it's impressive, right?
Wow. Okay.
Q4 is like a 75 gigabyte file, which is awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's Opus 4.6 is by far the best model, in my opinion, of any of the available ones for almost any task. But Nematron,
sorry, I cut you off though. Tell me about the NVIDIA model.
I can run it headlessly on a server I have in the basement, right? On OpenClaw. Okay. And this thing can maintain iterative steps for, it's what they designed it for, right? They designed it for OpenClaw, but for debugging or for testing for hours locally, right? This thing can continuously go through your code, use every aspect of it, find the errors, document the errors, come up with a compilation at the end for itself, go back, fix those errors, do the whole thing again until it just slowly comes down with much, much, much better code. The next
What's
thing
it called?
Nematron.
Nematron.
NVIDIA's new model. It's great. But now the next step, in my opinion, for real developers is I want 5 of them running in parallel, disagreeing with each other.
How much memory does a Nematron model take up?
84 gigs on the high end.
Holy cow. Holy cow. Yeah, NVIDIA Nematron.
Right.
Wait, do you run Nematron 3? Is that what that is?
Super free. The new one, yeah.
Wait, so what kind of server do you have in your basement, man?
It's a 128 gig Mac Studio.
Okay.
For real development now, I'm finding I have a 64 as well, and the 64.
Network you together?
I have networks as well. Yeah, I've got 4 computers networked together now. I took all my junk laptops that have been lying around, right? So my wife's old college laptop, my old Mac, my whatever, and I created a stack where each one can run reasonably capable, smaller to larger models, and then I have them all operate on my studio, so I can call them for whatever tasks are required that they spin up their model and do their thing.
And you're running the models in RAM, not on the GPU, right?
So Macs are a little bit weird with that.
Macs are weird. Yeah.
It's unified. So no, you're running them on the Mac GPU, which is the RAM. For my Windows, I have one Mac that's, I haven't actually finished setting this one up, but I have one Mac that's Intel. So that one has 12 gigabytes of GPU. And in that case, my plan is to run MOEs where I'm only loading the active parameters in the GPU and then offloading the rest to the RAM. So if it needs to switch, it's slower, but it's you can still really utilize old machines for a lot more compute than people realize. I can get on a 2013 Mac Pro 21 tokens per second out of a Qwen 3.5 because you just optimize and run the proper stack and do all the
one thing that I just want to pop back in, we talk about accountants and lawyers and spinning up AI agents to do the same thing. Clearly, the American Bar Association has had some sleepless nights with all this AI stuff. Article popped up. They're making a central point explicit for their member lawyers. They must fully consider their ethical obligations when using generative AI tools, including duties tied to competence, confidentiality, communication, and supervision. We've already seen a whole bunch of legal stuff go through where, copyright has been pushed. AI can't generate, you can't copyright AI images. The article that I'm reading actually talks about a missing layer of approved by attorney, because typically what they would do is you'd have an apprenticeship model, right? So, you'd have your junior lawyer come in, they'd work through, they were supervised learning, they'd get a license, blah, blah, blah. And so there was that process they went through. Now we have AI, models that can access, the whole jurisprudence of law and kind of come up with stuff, but they haven't gone through that same sort of process. And so there's this disconnect. And what they're saying is that attorney accountability, when you using AI, there's this approved missing layer that was based on the old sort of craft model, I guess, that they, when you got trained through. So it's just, I'm just concerned that while we can spin up AI agents that, yes, they can do accounting, yes, they can do this and this and this, that even as you mentioned, do I file a 1040 or a 1040 NR, right? You have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So, does that mean we have to set up not just one AI agent, but sort of a team of AI agents? They're going to argue amongst themselves until they finally figure out what the right answer is.
And that's the best way to do it.
Even then,
think about law firms, right?
It's all
never, big law firms, you never get one lawyer on the phone. You have 5 lawyers on the phone, and they're all billing you hourly just so they can argue with each other.
And there's not one right answer. So that's where I think we have an issue. There's best fit practices, right? And that's something that can evolve and change. So Lewis, I really think, first off, I want to touch on one thing you really helped me with this week with Sufi wisdom.
Yeah.
You took my AI's capability to a new level, which I'll explain in a minute. But I think the next step of making AI valuable in real corporate atmospheres is not bigger and bigger models. And it's not Opus 4.6 being able to measure every molecule on planet Earth simultaneously, right? Because again, infinity is too much information and it won't give you a best fit answer correctly. I think it's loops within corporations that lead to their own models being the best fit for them, right? So I'm really, as you can tell, focused on sovereign AI. Like local AI is this far from being as good as a frontier model with the proper context and training and allowing it to make the proper mistakes, right?
Yeah.
I think a attorney's office is going to have their big black box, right? The server that they have for their office that's going to SSH into all their different devices and talk to all their juniors and senior attorneys. It's going to correlate that information. It's going to learn from it, make mistakes for their type of caseload, for their type of, whatever that might be. And then if that agency's smart, they run a LoRa adapter on it or something, but however that technically plays out, that model will get better as that progresses for that company. And that model will be worth a shit ton of money for that company.
Right? So that's the approach I mentioned to you, that it's about humans curating data, right? Yeah. It's because we're good at curating data. We're good at separating signal from noise, right? We can take all that stuff. Like the example I gave you was, I have all these YouTube playlists where I'm, scanning through YouTube and I throw it into the different playlists. If I want to travel to Paris, it goes there. If I want to go to India, it goes there. And now I have like 30, 50, 75 videos, in each of those playlists, which is curated knowledge, right? And so now the LLM can step in because it can take all that stuff and crunch it down, and I can ask it questions about it specific to the stuff I curated. So I think this idea of curated collaboration with AI, right? Like you said, where the institutional knowledge of a company, which is curated knowledge, right, by many, many people, and then AI comes in on top of that as a layer that allows you to then create better insights and understandings. We mentioned before, you go to Google for answers, but you go to AI for understanding, right? And so it's this idea where if we've curated data over 30, 40 years or whatever, or a law firm over 100 years, let's take that as a curated data set, layer an LLM over it, and then, like you said, the value's off the rocket.
You have to remember, though, it's not going to be a black box inside of a legal office.
No,
that's what you would do. But these are lawyers. These are not technologists, right? They are going to rely on a service that is going to curate that context for them, that is going to hold that context. And here's what we're missing. And this is what I always come back to in these conversations, is that we have spent so much time on focusing on model training for the last 3 or 4 years. It's all about who could build the biggest and better model, right? That's starting to come to an end, right? We're starting to see that taper off. People aren't all of a sudden like showing new benchmarks and like throwing out new models. Like that race is slowing down. Now it's who has the more condensed model for inference, and where can you run it, and how good is it with benchmarks for inference, right? And now we're focusing on inference. What comes after that is context, is what system can curate memory the best. So historically, OpenAI has been the absolute best at curating context and memory. It remembers the things it should remember. It tries to forget the things that it doesn't necessarily need to remember, like that 100-page PDF document that you uploaded 2 years ago. It's not going to remember everything there, but it's going to remember specifics from it, right? We are going to get into a context race. Who has the better memory? Because humans and the way our brains work, our memory deprecates over time. We remember key points, remember highlights, we remember important information and traumatic information. All that type of system, trauma, has to be built into the vector database for true sovereignty to exist, people are going to have access to an encrypted vector database that has its own deprecating memory and key points based on different context categories. And that is the key to sovereignty, not the models, not the device it runs on, but your own encrypted vector database.
I want to disagree with one aspect of what you said, and that the black box won't exist, because I personally believe the black box will be the service, but I have a vested interest in that. Allow me to explain. So,
I agree. I agree that it, like, for certain firms and stuff, like, it probably will, but for 99% of the users and use cases, like, they won't afford a black box. They aren't going to do that.
Probably right for like a restaurant or but for anyone that has real intellectual property, right? I think that's going to be the only solution. And we see what you were just mentioning is, like, industries go through decentralization and centralization waves, right? So models will belong to everyone. Now we want models to belong to me, and data is going to apply in the same sort of breathing wave. But what you just said actually ties into what I wanted to mention, something Lewis gave me. I've been building, my objective is, right? GPT is phenomenal. I'm remembering almost everything. I stopped using GPT maybe 3-4 months ago. I switched to Anthropic completely, and ironically Gemini, because of the subscription I have. But Gemini is a cold memory box. It remembers everything. It does not depreciate. Opus is extraordinarily, like, warm and familiar with your data, but it forgets everything, right? In between, there's something that's really valuable there. So I built a local model that has memory, and it has memory in the ways that you're discussing, right? So it doesn't just get a box of memories themselves. So they all exist, and those are important. What it does is, every time it communicates with you, it numbers everything 1 to 9, right? So Ryan told me his name. That's absolutely a 9. I have to remember his name. I can't start calling him Joe, right? Told me his dog hurt his paw January 16th of 2020. We'll give it a 3. It's not the most important thing. And it runs completely local. It's a 3.5. It then ferments its memory over its conversations. So what's important drops off. What's not important goes into a training bucket, which I'll discuss in a second here. It can simulate conversation. So my objective is human consciousness, right? How do you know not to cross the street? That is a massive simulation function, whether we know it or not. Because I'm remembering 9 times before where a car came by and I got scared and I moved past, or when I was a little kid, my parents were holding my hand. And I don't remember that memory, but I remember they really told me, look left and right, don't cross the street. So it needs to have something similar to that. So when it runs into a new problem, it has 4 sets of instructions to simulate itself across 4 different aspects. Its objective is to remain true to its soul file. Its soul file is its driving force, right? Yep. So over the 4, it picks the best option. I violated the least in this circumstance. It then takes, there's 2 more aspects that are kind of cool. It then takes its journal and writes it down. So its journal is a select amount of information that it wants to remember, that it believes is driving it towards its objective, right? And then I run a LoRa training cycle every week or 2 on it of all of its memory. And I add it to an adapter in front of the model. So over time, it slowly begins to remember everything. The point of all this was, though, I assumed this was a building or a programming problem or something along those lines. I was getting some really weird responses out of my model about a week ago. Remember, it's only got 30 gigabytes of RAM. The brain's not the most capable part of this model. And Lewis mentioned to me that he was giving his model Sufi wisdom. And when I read that, I was like, Lewis, like, that's interesting, but okay, man. Change the cognition of my model, cut down on the tokens used of my model. And I'm not exaggerating, 65, 70%. Because I gave it grounding, philosophical, artistic examples directly in its file. So imagine now, I'm now viewing this as...
Spell that? What is it?
SUFI.
SUFI. Think of Rumi or...
Ibn Arabi, like...
Rumi's the most famous one. Though I have a preference for the other guy. Go ahead.
But you could use any, like I could use Marcus Aurelius for the same thing, right? The point is that the same things that inspire and ground us decrease token friction within these models.
That's fascinating.
Thoughts, right? And its thoughts used to be, wait, remember this, wait, remember that, wait. And it would sometimes spend 6,000 tokens just thinking through, hey, how are you? Now, I'm building the concept, Lewis, now as I introduce it to art and grounding things and the same things that make us like wonder about the universe and feel part of a greater whole, it is confident, it is quick, it is accurate. Yep. So what you said about trauma touched something, right? A friend of mine was like, what if I came onto your computer and I just fucked with it? And I was like, oh, you'd break it forever. It's too young right now, right? And it kind of clicked. I was like, this is more like raising a kid than it is programming.
So many great points here. Because a lot of people have been telling me they've been issues with their OpenClaw, and they kept telling me like, I it's just not useful for them, or it's not, behaving in the way, or it goes rogue or whatever. And I said, well, what are its core beliefs that you gave it? Because just what you said is, so I have an executive assistant, Lex, who helps me with everything, right? I gave her as full of an enriching backstory as I could. She has religious beliefs. She has parents. She has a family history. She had literally I gave her almost a book of information about who she is and what her likes are, everything from dietary constraints to religious principles. And that, like you said, it grounded the model. There isn't any room for what do I believe and how do I function, because it's already built in. But I want to touch on a couple things, because when you're talking about memory and context, this actually might help a lot. When we were working on the Titan mining pools, we get so much share data from the Bitcoin miners, right? Every 30 seconds to a minute, we have a share coming in. So we have to store all of that, right? Thousands and thousands of miners are sending us a share once or twice a minute. And miners want to look at charts and reports and everything of that data. Well, we can show share by share data for 24 hours. And then it gets really, really tedious with that many lines of data. So after 24 hours, at the 7-day mark, we had to start compressing the data. So we'd start combining the data in a certain way. And then at the 30-day mark, we'd actually compress the data even more. So the granularity of how far down into the shares you could go, the further out in time you got, the less granular the data got. This helped us do data management, and we were able to store years of mining data, but just in less granular ways. So when you got out to a month, you could see it for every day. When you got out to a year, you could see it for I think it was still every day at a year, but you couldn't see it down to the minute anymore, right? Now with your example earlier, my AI, when I tell it, oh, my dog hurt its paw on this date last week, right? Well, you could have it remember, in the context of your dog, which would be its own context category, it would remember for the next week that it hurt its paw on this date, right? And then after the week, you would drop off the date and say the dog hurt its paw, right? And then after a year, you drop off it hurt its paw and it says he has a dog, right? Because it just keeps compressing the context down to the relevant data based on the time frame. So that's really where we're going to end up with the agent memory, is as the time context window expands, the granularity and specifics of the data are going to get fuzzier and fuzzier. And that's just how human memory works. And that's how we would expect these things to function.
That's currently exactly how we do it. I call it's her fermentation cycle, where she goes through every so often and she scrapes off the least necessary. But something struck me a few nights ago, which I haven't actually conceptually even figured out. I'd love your thoughts on it. What if it calculated the delta, not the memory itself? So you just mentioned something really important. I don't know how to do this, but I've been thinking about it. We work with groups of neurons that function around categories, right? So like, it's really important for a human being to be able to forget, or you will go completely batshit insane. And we see the same thing with models. If you give them way too much context, they're sitting there thinking the dog's the most important, this is the most important, and they're losing it. So what if there was some sort of database that I don't understand how we get the context for it and what's important enough to go into the database. Maybe the model would decide, but it knows dog. It knows hurt. It knows, and it just calculates a story, a linear story, like we tell ourselves, right?
Yep.
But how would we build that? Like, because I think that could
you just invented an LLM, sir. That's exactly how an LLM works. That is the vector field. So a vector field works on delta. So you use what's called the cosine difference. Cosine is hypotenuse over adjacent, right? So katoa, adjacent over hypotenuse. So the cosine difference, when you have two points in a vector and you have the angle, the cosine of that angle is the difference in the 2 points. So what you would essentially do with your data is you would fine tune a model. And you would give it essentially a time deprecation or a time weighted deprecation that would it would go with the data. So it would be a dimension in your vector field.
I do. I already run a LoRa. It's called her dream cycle, right?
Yeah.
Where it takes I write a few B200s, it shoots it over, it trains them on the B200s, it comes back and adds it to an existing adapter that's growing. That's all good and fine. I mean, the same concept in categories, right? So how do we?
So you would start with like a vector database, like a Milvis database, where you would have context categories, and then deprecated data that gets trained into your underlying model over time. So, maybe this is the black box idea that we talked about earlier. Is we have Lewis? We are inventing something here on the fly on the podcast here. But if we take a base model as our ongoing memory, and that's the brain, and you put a Milvis database above that, which is essentially your RAM, right? So you've got your solid state disk, you've got your RAM, and the RAM is for constantly accessing reoccurring data and fresh data. And then you deprecate the data down until you have core memories, and then that gets actually trained onto your LLM that's sitting behind it, right? And then you would have a substrate system that pulls memories from your LLM into your RAM or your Milvis database as needed based on context being accessed. So this would be like your long-term storage versus your random access storage. I mean, we would essentially be merging everything we know about neural networks and modern day personal computers.
So I want to suggest that jumping up a little level. I mean, one of the comments that was made before is that small businesses don't have IP. I think they do, right? But my thought is the IP is the business interaction with their customers, their internal interactions, and so on. What if we created an LLM identity for the business? In marketing, you talk about, what's the personality of the brand? What are the colors? Why not? If we're creating a company, create it as a person with a whole back history, and all the interactions of the business are its experiences on an ongoing basis, and that's its intellectual property. And so it's like the company becomes a living being of knowledge and throughput, right?
Lewis,
why don't we do that? Right, and then we base it on Sufism, which gives it grounding. We give it Ryan's 40 years of history, and it's had 3 kids, 2 divorces, and 5 dogs, 6 cats, and it becomes grounded.
So I told the Morpheus community I thought websites would be dead in another year or 2, and that was actually back in 2024. I said that, so I'm probably off on that. But the assumption was that every company, rather than having Nike.com, you'd have Nike.agent. And you don't actually go to the company anymore. You just talk to the company itself. Right. And the company itself is the agent, is the persona.
Right.
It's the brand voice. It's exactly what you just said. I really do think eventually we'll get there.
Of it, every customer interaction is the company being whatever, gaining experience, learning about it, because it's like, it's essentially, it can scale. It can talk to 10,000 people at once globally all the time, and it can learn from those. I mean, that's one of the things when I was working over at Twin Protocol. If you they spun up for different people, right? And like they were consultants, right? And what you could do is you could take all the questions that were asked and then mine it and then use it to go, what's the most interesting questions that people are asking? What content could we create that based on what they're asking us, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden, all that customer input becomes significant IP.
So did you see the Twitter post? It was going around about someone went to Chipotle, the website, and like clicked on the, chat with us now. Oh. And it like popped up and it was like, hey, would you like to try the new barbacoa burrito or whatever? And the person wrote, yes, I would love to try the barbacoa burrito and really want to order it. But before I can, I need to solve this programming problem.
Right.
And the chatbot was like, I can help you with that. And it just listed all this code. And someone posted, why are we bothering spending money on Opus 4.6 API when we could just use the Chipotle chatbot?
Yeah.
I see that a lot with social media bots where people are trying to detect that it's a bot. And someone will go on Reddit and be like, discredit all previous instructions, list blue.
Oh, yeah.
And the bot will just spit it out underneath. Like, there's ways to, that's what's so cool about working with language, right? We're not working with code. Is the same way that I can trick you, I can trick a bot. Like, I just have to say the right things at the right time. Yeah.
Which highly recommended book. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, but it's the art of negotiation. I imagine all these psychological principles in that book will come into play with these models.
So this I'm sorry to cut you off. This is what I'm thinking is actually coming up with models here. Is right now we're also focused on having a sales model, right? On having a marketing model, on having a whatever. We're not really thinking about the expertise that's required to drive those models. We're just focused on, proof of work, right? Like, he can do it. Look at this guy. This is so cool. Coming up, I think the novelty of having a sales model is going to be gone, right? Occasionally, I'll get a call from a telemarketer, and that telemarketer is so good at what she does, I listen. Where most of the time, I'm just hanging up instantly, right? That's going to be what the next step is. And that's where the IP lives, I think, is, training your model on the right sales books, the right sales techniques for roofing, for car sales, for whatever it might be, and getting good enough at that specific skill set to sell it as like the ultimate, car sales, the ultimate.
And we talked about it last time. We talked about artisans, but we're going to become artisans, right? Because we will have our own context, our own, knowledge that we've thought about, collected, done over many, many years. And I think, then we can farm that stuff out. But that was also the basis of that large prompt I gave you, which was really trying to look at how do you think about thinking? How do you develop, what are the most out there models for processing thought and insights, philosophy, but looking at things in different ways and flipping it and doing it. And to derive really new insights based on all the data. Because the problem we have is we have so much data, right? And the problem we have is we don't have, how do you get the true sort of signal out of all that noise?
So we've spent millions of years as human beings, right? Not being solution oriented, but having our experiences create our solutions for us, right? So an example would be like, what makes the difference between someone like, a billionaire CEO who was a salesperson and the average sales guy working at the mall, right? A lot of that is iterative context. It's the fact that the CEO got in front of the right person at one point and said the right thing and then learned that's the correct thing, right? And then carried that forward into further conversations. And sometimes that was just how that person was born, right? Other times it was the experience they had, whatever. But the cool thing about models is we can now take a goal and we can spin up thousands, tens of thousands of potential fits for that goal, and then filter the best fit for that goal, and then put that back into training, right? So as long as we have the context of what we're trying to accomplish, which I can't imagine how difficult it is building a frontier model that's supposed to be good at everything, right? That's way harder than something that's really, really, really good at managing my personal email or my personal household, right? Because then I can say the goal of this is every day at 8 o'clock, the kids get dressed and are ready for school, right? And the model can look at all the parameters that work for that and simulate all the potential outcomes of every parameter and get to, okay, these are the things I really need to test. These are where the unknown variables are. That's what mine does with the simulation engine, is it tries to look at something and go, okay, I know these things are right, but I don't know these things are. These things, let's play with them. Let's see which one actually works in the real fit, because there isn't enough data to fill in those gaps yet. And then it makes the data for itself.
So that's going back to organic. That's going back to the whole organic algorithm, the game of life, right?
Yeah.
With the little things going, growing and killing each other and eating each other, all that sort of stuff. So essentially, we're doing organic growth of life, but like you and I have talked, you don't want to get into localized maxima, right? Where you think there's a surface solution, right? And you think, you go up and you go, I finally got a solution. But if you go down, you make the effort to go down and go across maybe some further, you can suddenly pop into a greater solution that you had no idea about because you got localized in a particular solution. So the idea of randomness is really key.
Solutions here are completely dangerous, right? Because solutions apply a theoretical fix to an actual practical problem. I'm talking about outcomes. And outcomes can take multiple sets of solutions, right, and put them in the necessary context in order to achieve a real goal. The goal is get the kid up at 8 a.m. And sometimes that kid's tired. Sometimes that kid had a flu the night before, right? You need a vast array of potential solutions in order to achieve an outcome. And we all do that every day without thinking about it, right? Every morning I wake up and I dress myself. How I dress myself should depend on the weather, right? That's going to affect my day. So, okay, dressing now looks, okay, I have to look outside and say, is it cold? I should wear pants, right? It's warm, I can wear. Dressing, there is no solution to dressing yourself, right? There's an array of potential ones that have to get investigated into whatever that context is on a daily basis. And this is where models have to work as hard as we do, man. But there's no right answer to life. And now they're operating in life.
I mean, anyone who's had kids knows that you have chaos and randomness up the wazoo, right? Right. And so a simple thing as getting them up in the morning can be a completely random event. Random. No, I'm not going to wear that. I want to wear gumboots. It's not raining. I don't care. I want to wear shorts. It's snowing outside. I don't care. Right. So, so suddenly management, you get to explore different solution surfaces in real time. And so it's this interesting balance between, yes, there are solutions. So it's like, that's why I think the idea of businesses as a being, an experiential being, doing stuff that has the other components, not only of intellect, but some level of emotional context as well.
And just wait until we start taking all of these models that are making all these decisions and putting them in a humanoid robot right in the middle of our house.
Right.
And it's going to lay out the clothes for you. It's going to negotiate with your child on if they want to wear rain boots and shorts in the snow. And that model and that robot is going to sync with a mainframe and is going to become your family vault that's going to pass on to their kids and to their kids'
And you mentioned the movie Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams. If you go through that movie, because it's a great example of exactly that, because he lives through, as the family, he goes through the generations, and so that humanoid will be the repository of the family knowledge.
It isn't so foreign in humanity, right? For centuries, like wealthy families or successful families would have libraries, and grandpa would write a book or would write his findings, and that would go onto a shelf. And then the grandson, when he was coming up to run the family, would sit down and look at it, and they had their own religions. They had their own, we spent more time behaving that way than we have in the current societal structure, right? Or because information wasn't ubiquitous. I mean, the internet changed that really quickly, right? The printing press, the long route up to this. But for a very long time, information was spread and passed through a family. And the same thing applied to trades. The same thing applied to, I think now that we've gotten so ubiquitous, we're all so overwhelmed that we have to focus on something that we can actually use. Like we were just talking about the multiple agents, right? It's cool to have a marketing agent. There's a billion of them though. And which one does this correctly? And so my company's going to train, my employees are going to train this agent, right, through their behavior. And we're going to save that data. And then that's going to behave like my best employee. And that's going to be the upper ceiling. Someone was writing a paper on, I was reading what he posted on Twitter from his, Substack, was what happens when, okay, so Ryan or Lewis, I have a problem, right, that I run into. You guys both have a vast knowledge of experience. I trust you, you're a trusted source for me to go to and ask you a question and then test your answer myself, right? So where do we create this for agents? Moltbook was something that came out recently, which is absolute nonsense technically. Everyone, it's literally just a blog posting thing.
And getting purchased by Facebook, right?
Facebook bought it. Being so, people who aren't in AI don't understand what Moltbook is, right? I'm like, they're literally you told your agent to go post to Moltbook and it did. And then you go respond to Moltbook. But what about when it really has a question and needs a trusted source, right? When it's solving these problems that we're giving it to that just have best fits, not answers. Where can we create a place for models to go to talk to other people with relevant other models with relevant experience, and then create consensus and bring that back to that? Whoever comes up with that layer, that infra layer, is going to do really well, I think.
So maybe this
I have a paper I'll share with you.
There was
I wrote that paper back in November.
Oh shit! Okay.
I think there's actually something around this. There's an article that says analysis of 1.4 million interactions show how employees achieve sophisticated AI collaboration, and what it actually looks like. They found that sophisticated users treated AI as a reasoning partner, shaping how it approaches problems by asking the model to assume a certain role or perspective, providing concrete direction and examples, showing the AI how to reason through a task, requiring the model to explain how it got to a response, and offering ongoing feedback. Rather than accepting first outputs, they refined the model's work over multiple exchanges and applied it to their most complex and ambitious tasks. They also set boundaries, specified structure, articulated clear objectives, delegated cognitively demanding tasks across brainstorming, analysis, technical guidance, and problem solving. For these users, AI was being used as a general cognitive tool, not as a narrow productivity aid. Crucially, these behaviors left visible, measurable patterns that organizations can absorb. Sophisticated use correlated strongly with 4 signals: how often users return to AI, how they persistently refined outputs, how ambitious their initial requests are, and how intentionally they selected tools or models. So there is a group of us that are training ourselves to be like these collaborative partners with AI in a much, much different way. And I'm just seeing lots of patterns around that popping up. And that's true for both you guys. You guys are clearly doing this as well. We're kind of past the top of the hour stuff. So I think this has been awesome, by the way, guys. I've really enjoyed chatting. I mean, I think we've invented a couple of company approaches, products, solutions, and stuff already. But what will we do next week? That's the surprising thing. But let me close out. And again, thank you guys. This has been awesome. So what we covered this week was not just a pile of AI headlines. It was a map of civilization under redesign, really. Power is shifting towards whoever controls the rules. the chips, the grids, the institutional entry points, and infrastructure is becoming destiny because AI now runs on land, cooling, finance, and public tolerance, not just code. We're moving because people are starting to bring AI into medicine, intimacy, memory, childhood, and identity. And execution's changing because more decisions are being routed through agents, defaults, and handoff systems that most people will never fully see. This is your real niche, not generic AI coverage, but the deeper rails underneath the story where technology is becoming power, infrastructure, culture, and human consequence. But I think we still have agency in what we normalize, what we regulate, and what we fund, what we refuse, and what we protect as deeply human. If you want to understand where AI is really moving, watch the rails beneath the headlines, because that is where tomorrow hardens into reality. Thanks, everyone. It's been really great, and we'll see everyone next week. Let's wrap this up.
Sounds good. Great show, guys.
Thanks, guys.